They say you never truly know someone until you see them at their worst. For me, that revelation came on what should have been the happiest night of my life, the eve of my wedding to Holly, the woman I had loved for 5 years. I remember every detail of that evening with painful clarity. The rehearsal dinner had gone perfectly. Champagne flowed, toasts were made, and Holly's smile seemed to light up the entire restaurant. My best man, Kylin, had given a speech that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "True love," he'd said, raising his glass, "is the rarest treasure in this world." How quickly words turned to ash. It was just after midnight when I realized I'd left my speech notes in Kylin's hotel room during our final tux fitting. With the wedding just hours away, I needed those notes. My hands trembled slightly as I knocked on his door, but no one answered. Using the spare keycard he'd given me earlier, I quietly let myself in. The sounds reached me before the sight did. Hushed whispers, soft moans, the unmistakable rhythm of betrayal. I stood frozen in the darkened entryway as my world collapsed around me. There, in the dimly lit room, were the two people I trusted most in this world. My fiancée wrapped in the arms of my best friend. Something cold and calculating took over then. Instead of shouting, instead of the rage that burned beneath my skin, I silently pulled out my phone and recorded their treachery. Only when I had what I needed did I clear my throat. Holly's scream pierced the air. Kylin just stared, his face a mask of defiance rather than shame. "How long?" My voice sounded foreign to my own ears, eerily calm. Neither answered. Holly clutched the sheets to her chest, mascara streaming down her face. "6 months, Kylin finally said, his voice steady as he reached for Holly's hand. "And honestly, man, she was never yours to begin with." In that moment, I saw something in his eyes, a smug satisfaction that told me this wasn't just passion or weakness. This was calculated. This was conquest. "Is that what you think?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "It's what I know," he replied with the confidence of a man who believed he was untouchable. Little did he know that his words had just signed the warrant for his own destruction. As I turned to leave that hotel room, a plan was already forming in my mind. The wedding would be canceled, yes, but that would only be the beginning. Kylin thought he had taken everything from me. He had no idea that in those few seconds of arrogance, he had set in motion a sequence of events that would systematically dismantle his entire life. Some betrayals demand not a scene, but a reckoning. Revenge, they say, is a dish best served cold. And cold I became, methodical, patient, calculating. After what Kylin had done, I knew emotional outbursts would only satisfy me temporarily. No, I needed something more, complete. I created a spreadsheet first. It sounds mundane, doesn't it? But every great destruction begins with proper planning. Columns for his vulnerabilities, rows for my approaches, professional channels, personal connections, timeline projections. I treated my revenge like the project management position I'd been denied, with meticulous attention to detail. At work, I became a ghost, present but unseen, watching Kylin parade around with my stolen ideas. I installed screen recording software on my computer and began documenting everything. Each time he took credit for work that wasn't his, I saved it. Each time he claimed inspiration for concepts we both knew were mine, I logged it. "You've seemed quiet lately," my colleague Jasmine mentioned one day by the coffee machine. "Everything okay?" I smiled, the expression not quite reaching my eyes. "Just focused." Through careful social engineering and building trust with the right administrative staff, I gained access to Kylin's work emails. That's when I discovered he wasn't just stealing from me, he'd been doing it for years. Projects claimed, ideas borrowed, credit misappropriated. I saved everything. Screenshots, email threads, timestamp evidence. But workplace misconduct was only the foundation. The real leverage came when I discovered his relationship with Odette, his fiancée of 3 years. The woman he claimed was the moral compass in his life during company retreats. The woman who had no idea about Clara from accounting, or Zoe from the downtown office. "I've always admired how dedicated you are to Odette," I told him once over lunch, watching him squirm slightly at her name. "That kind of commitment is rare these days." He nodded, mentioning their wedding plans, while I thought of the lipstick-stained collar I'd photographed from his jacket in the break room. Day by day, I constructed my case. Evidence compiled and backed up in triplicate. HR policies reviewed and highlighted. I crafted anonymous emails to relevant parties, each scheduled for strategic delivery. The beauty wasn't in rushing. It was in the certainty that when I finally pulled the trigger, there would be no recovery. Some nights, I'd wake in a cold sweat, wondering if I'd become something worse than him. But then, I'd remember how he looked me in the eye after stealing 6 months of my work, saying, "That's just how the game is played," and my resolve would harden again. I wasn't playing a game. I was administering justice, cold, precise, and inescapable. Kylin had built his success on quicksand, and I simply needed to step back and watch as the ground began to shift beneath him. His reputation, his relationship, his career, all balanced on lies I was meticulously documenting. And soon, very soon, the first domino would fall. The consequences for Kylin came like a storm, not with a warning drizzle, but with the sudden violence of a cloudburst. Monday morning began as any other, with Kylin striding into the office, coffee in hand, confidence oozing from every pore. But there was a strange electricity in the air, a tension that hung heavy as he noticed the averted gazes, the hushed conversations that died when he approached. By noon, the HR director and his manager appeared at his cubicle, their faces grim. "We need to speak with you," the HR director said, her voice flat. "Bring nothing with you." In a sterile conference room, they laid out the evidence before him: emails, text messages, recordings. His former teammate Elsie had finally spoken up about the months of belittlement. 3 other colleagues had come forward with similar stories. And most devastatingly, Odette, his fiancée of 3 years, had provided her own statement, detailing how his workplace behavior mirrored the emotional manipulation she'd endured at home. "This is a witch hunt," Kylin snarled, his fist coming down on the table. "You can't do this to me." But they could. And they did. By 1 o'clock, security was escorting him through the office, past rows of former colleagues who watched in silence as he carried his personal items in a cardboard box. His access card was deactivated before he even reached his car. The professional collapse was swift and absolute. Former mentors wouldn't take his calls. LinkedIn connections severed ties. The industry whisper network, always efficient, worked overtime. By Wednesday, he couldn't get an interview anywhere in the city. And Holly? Poor Holly, who had dreamed of starting fresh with Kylin, who had believed his every promise and excuse. She arrived at work Thursday to find her own manager and HR waiting. "Administrative leave, effective immediately," they told her, "pending investigation into your role in covering up multiple ethical violations." She sat in her apartment that night, surrounded by half-packed moving boxes, preparations for the life with Kylin that would never materialize. Her phone buzzed with a text from him. "They're destroying me. I need you now more than ever." But as Holly stared at her reflection in the darkened window, something cold and clear crystallized within her. This wasn't love. This was drowning. 2 weeks later, she watched movers load her furniture into a truck bound for her parents' home 3 states away, her savings depleted by legal fees, her professional reputation in tatters, her 5-year career plan shattered like fine china dropped on concrete. "Sometimes," her mother had said on the phone, "you have to lose everything to see what was never really there." As Holly turned in her apartment keys, She wondered what else she might discover in the emptiness that Kylin had left behind. It's been nearly a year since everything went down with Kylin and Holly. The memories had started to fade like old photographs left in the sun, still there, but less vivid, less painful. I was in a different place now, literally and figuratively. I walked into this little hole-in-the-wall restaurant downtown, the kind with dim lighting and mismatched chairs that somehow still manages to charge $20 for a burger. The hostess led me to a corner table, and that's when I saw him, Kylin, wearing a stained apron and carrying a bus tray full of dirty dishes. Our eyes met across the room, and I watched his expression transform: confusion, recognition, and then pure, undiluted rage. He nearly dropped the tray, his knuckles whitening around the plastic edges. I simply nodded and took my seat, focusing on the menu like it was the most fascinating document I'd ever read. I knew he would come over. Some confrontations are as inevitable as gravity. "You," he hissed, appearing beside my table like an unwelcome ghost. "You ruined everything." I looked up, feeling strangely calm. "Hello, Kylin." "Don't give me that calm bullshit," he spat, voice trembling with rage. "My life is in shambles because of you." I set the menu down slowly. "I didn't do anything to you that you hadn't already done to yourself." "Holly left me," he said, his voice cracking slightly. "The company fired me after that scene you caused. I'm bussing tables at 35. I studied him, the dark circles under his eyes, the unkempt hair, the desperation radiating from him like heat. "Holly's living with her mother," I told him quietly, "after she pawned your engagement ring to pay off gambling debts. Seems she had quite the hidden problem." His face contorted. "You're lying." "I have nothing to gain by lying to you now, Kylin. I moved on months ago." And I had. Rain had come into my life like her namesake, gentle, cleansing, bringing growth where there had been only scorched earth, genuine in ways Holly never was. At work, I'd just received the promotion Kylin had been angling for, not through manipulation or politics, but through consistent work and ethical choices. "Sir, is there a problem?" A manager appeared, eyeing Kylin with clear disapproval. "No problem," I said, glancing at Kylin's name tag. "Just catching up with an old acquaintance." Kylin's jaw clenched so tight I could almost hear his teeth cracking. With a last venomous glare, he stalked away, shoulders hunched under the weight of consequences finally caught up to him. I watched him go, feeling not triumph, but a strange, calm certainty. I'd never raised my voice, never schemed for revenge. I'd simply stood my ground and let the universe balance its own scales. My phone buzzed, a text from Rain asking how long until I'd be home. Home. The word felt warm, real. I left a generous tip when I finished my meal. Not for Kylin, but for whoever would have to deal with him for the rest of their shift. As I stepped out into the cool evening air, I realized some victories don't need to be claimed. They simply arrive, quiet as whispers, when you've done the hard work of moving forward.